Well, welcome. After that brief commercial break, I want to thank Dr. Orrick and Dr. Najera for being here. And I will let you take it away and let us know what you need technology-wise to make sure that we get your presentations out there. Welcome.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair and Assembly members. My name is Kaggie Orrick. I'm the director of UC Berkeley's California Wolf Project, but I've also been a conservation practitioner for over 15 years on human-predator conflict and coexistence. This was covered briefly, but conflict is growing due to land use changes, human expansion, as well as the Endangered Species Act and other species recovery using conservation law, and then climate-driven shifts. Research on human-wildlife conflict has shown that actual losses explain only part of the conflict, and that strong predictors of human tolerance as well as human action towards wildlife are going to include perceived fairness, trust in the institutions that are managing those wildlife, a sense of control or agency, and then also how do wildlife impact cultural identity and livelihood dependence. What I think is important as well is that two communities can experience identical losses and respond very differently. So when we're thinking about policy, when we're thinking about management, it needs to be flexible to reflect the differences in those communities. Improving tolerance and addressing human-wildlife conflict is not only ethically important, but it's also going to be one of the most effective ways that we can reduce poaching and support recovering wildlife populations. The loss of private property in rural areas can lead to development, subdivisions, and that decreases wildlife habitat. That is especially true in California, and the best interest of wildlife management agencies and those who want to support carnivore recovery to try and reduce human-wildlife conflict, we're going to have to be thinking about incentive-based programs on private lands. Across species, across regions, evidence for successful human-wildlife programs are co-designed. They're co-produced solutions, and they always outperform top-down ones. So responsible agencies need to be able to act early rather than react to chronic conflict. There needs to be focus on improving that trust, communication, and clarity along with technical tools. There needs to be able to reduce uncertainty for affected communications. We've heard about this already. Communication is key. And above all, it's going to have to be adaptive, tailored to local, ecological, and social conditions to be able to react in the ways that the communities need. The bottom line, too, and what we've already heard in the previous panel, is that no single tool is going to work everywhere, that we really need to have systems that are sustainable as opposed to standalone interventions. I know that this is going to be asked. I know we're going to be talking about this, so I just briefly want to state the role of lethal removal in wolf management. Lethal removal is an active tool in wolf management in other U.S. states and Canadian provinces where wolves occur, and other states can provide models for better flexibility. So in Eastern Washington and Eastern Oregon, after a certain number of verified livestock depredations over a specific period of time, lethal removal can be considered. But in Western Washington and Western Oregon, it's only possible to lethally remove a wolf when it poses an immediate threat to human life. So giving context to other places that have incorporated this in different areas. So the UC Berkeley's California Wolf Project has been contracted by the CDFW over the last year and a half and has co-developed 7 objectives to provide foundational understanding to the recovery of wolves in California. The conclusions I'm presenting are kind of a high-level summary of various data that we've collected using different methods. I want to highlight things that I'm not going to be talking about today, but we have one of the largest camera trap arrays in Northern California in partnership with UC Davis to look at prey species and other predator species that are going to be important. And we've also conducted a number of interviews and interacted with a number of different stakeholders. I want to talk about 3 key results that will be useful for this conversation about human-wildlife conflict. The first is that wolves have widespread suitable habitat across California, and that is going to enable population growth and expansion. So we're going to see increases in human-wildlife conflict moving forward. We've developed a habitat suitability model, and incorporating that with wolf biology, we've been able to predict and project where new packs are going to settle across the next 20 years. And so each of these polygons here represent a potential home range where wolves could establish, and the color of that polygon indicates a potential pack ranging from dark blue all the way, which is where wolves are currently established, to yellow, which is a predicted 20 years out. I think I just want to highlight to you all here that we need to be thinking about policies and sustainable funding that is more comprehensive and supportive for a program around wolves, because even districts that don't necessarily have wolves now could have wolves in the near future. The second result that I want to share with you is that depredation risk is high in California. Compared to depredations per wolf in 2023 across other states, for those in the back who can't see, California is at the top. Oregon, Wyoming, Washington, Idaho, and Montana follow. But that depredation risk is significantly higher in our state compared to others that have wolves. And what we have found is that that depredation risk increases as deer densities decline. That pattern is most consistent with prey-limited, human-dominated systems such as Europe. And that speaks to our need to be thinking about native prey availability. So not only thinking about improving habitat for elk and for deer and other prey that wolves are eating, but we also need to be thinking about domestic prey vulnerability. Wolves are constantly weighing this negative stimuli against, like hazing, against the reward for food. So we need to be figuring out ways that we can create more negative stimuli around cattle, around livestock that push them towards that native prey. The third result that I want to share is that trust needs to be improved, and that's both around non-lethal tools as well as across institutions. So we sent a questionnaire to those who received the pilot compensation funding, and we asked about the effectiveness of non-lethal tools. And what you can see here is that all tools have supporters and detractors, and that speaks to the value of a flexible program. So wildlife or livestock producers are able to implement the tools that they think are going to be most effective. I think this also speaks to the need to have more workshops and programs and support of how to use these tools and implement them specifically on their operations and capture the nuances that might be available. We understand that wolves could have been new in some of these areas, so the familiarity and knowledge about some of these tools can range, and that's why I think it's really important to address education within all of that. The second question, we've talked a lot about trust already on this panel. We've talked about how trust can improve human-wildlife conflict. One of the questions that we asked was, to what degree do you trust information about wolves as well as wolf management from the following sources? Again, for those in the back, I know that it's difficult to see. It ranges cattlemen, CDFW, county officials, neighbors, nonprofit organizations, NRCS, cooperative extension, university researchers, and USDA. And what we can see is that there is higher trust in neighbors, cooperative extension, universities, and counties opposed to CDFW and other institutions. But that just highlights that there's all things that we need to improve in order to reduce human-wildlife conflict, especially as we are seeing wolves increase across the state. We are going to have to work on improving this. This also speaks to sustainable funding and training for management to address this. So ultimately, what this means for California, thinking about solutions and suggestions, there needs to be co-developed bottom-up programs that work alongside livestock producers to reduce conflict. There needs to be more coordinated action across multiple scales and science-based management that's paired meaningfully. In the immediate, the things that I think that we can hit on, thinking about bridge building with landowners and local communities, I know that's moving in that direction now. Stable funding for applied and adaptive management, as well as the science. There needs to be an expanded non-lethal conflict prevention program, essentially. And there needs to be stronger federal and state coordination. In the long term, we also need to be thinking about land use planning, specifically around habitat management, not only for large carnivores, but their prey base, and that is also in conjunction with forest management and fire recovery. Finally, I just want to end with a quote that's from the IUCN Human Wildlife Conflict and Coexistence Specialist Group. It says, there can be pressure for quick fixes to human wildlife conflict, but actions that do not consider the wider social and local context lead to unintended consequences and increased tensions. And with that, I thank you.
Mr. Nahara,
Oh, we can skip
or
it.
Dr. Nahara.